The Colorado winter had sunk its teeth deep into the landscape, coating everything in a brittle layer of ice and snow. For Michael, the chill went beyond the weather. It settled in his bones, a constant reminder of the warmth he'd lost with Sarah. Their small cabin, usually echoing with her laughter, now felt cavernous, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of Lily's online school in the next room. He stood by the window, a steaming mug of coffee, doing little to thaw the ache in his chest. Outside, the frozen lake shimmered under the weak winter sun, a deceptively serene expanse. He remembered summers spent there with Sarah and a younger Lily, skipping stones and sharing secrets whispered on the breeze. Now, the ice felt like a barrier, a frozen testament to a life interrupted. Lily, his 16-year-old, navigated this new reality with a quiet resilience he both admired and worried about. She'd retreated into her own world, headphones a permanent fixture, her emotions a tightly guarded fortress. He longed to break through, to share a moment of connection, but the right words always seemed to elude him. "Ready to go, Dad?" Lily's voice was flat, devoid of inflection, as she entered the living room, bundled in her winter coat. They were headed to the grocery store, a mundane task that felt monumental in their grief-stricken routine. As they drove, the landscape unfolded in shades of white and grey. The skeletal branches of trees clawed at the pale sky, and the snow-covered fields stretched out like a silent, frozen sea. Michael found himself glancing at the lake as they passed, a habit formed from years of appreciating its beauty with Sarah. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement on the ice near the center. He squinted, his breath catching in his throat. It was a deer, its slender legs splayed awkwardly, its body trembling. It had ventured too far onto the thinning ice and was now trapped, each desperate struggle only widening the cracks around it. Panic clenched Michael's gut. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road, his heart pounding. "Stay here, Lily," he said, his voice urgent. "What is it?" she asked, concern finally breaking through her usual detachment. Michael didn't answer. He was already out of the truck, adrenaline surging. He could see the fear in the deer's wide, panicked eyes. Then the inevitable happened. With a sickening crack, the ice gave way, and the deer plunged into the frigid water, its desperate bleating cutting through the cold air. Without hesitation, Michael shed his coat and boots, his fingers fumbling with the laces. The icy wind whipped against his exposed skin, but he barely registered it. All he could think about was the trapped animal. He had to do something. The shock of the icy water stealing his breath was immediate and brutal. It felt like 1,000 needles pricking his skin, each movement an agonizing effort. The broken ice was sharp, slicing at his hands and arms as he pushed forward. He swam with a desperate urgency, the deer's whimpers his only guide. When he finally reached the animal, it was floundering weakly, its eyes glazed with fear and exhaustion. The water was a death sentence in this temperature. Michael knew he had to get it out, and fast. He tried to lift it, but the deer was heavier than he expected, its fur soaked and weighing it down. "Come on," he grunted, his muscles screaming in protest. He managed to get his arms under its chest, trying to support its weight as he began to kick towards the shore. The distance felt impossibly long. Each inch gained a victory hard won against the biting cold and the deer's dead weight. He yelled for help, his voice hoarse and strained, but the road was empty. It was just him and the dying animal, battling the unforgiving grip of the frozen lake. He could feel his own strength fading, his limbs growing numb, his vision starting to blur. Doubt gnawed at him. Was he strong enough? Would they both succumb to the icy depths? But the memory of Sarah's unwavering compassion, her fierce love for all creatures, fueled his resolve. He had to try. He had to keep going. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his feet touched solid ground. Lily was there, her face a mask of terror and relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. She reached out, helping him drag the deer onto the snow-covered bank. They collapsed, shivering uncontrollably, the rescued animal lying still between them. They huddled together, two figures amidst the vast, frozen landscape, their breath misting in the frigid air. The deer lay panting, its fur matted and icy but alive. Lily had wrapped her coat around it, her earlier detachment completely gone, replaced by a fierce protectiveness. Michael's body was racked with shivers, his skin burning and numb simultaneously. He knew they needed to get warm, and soon. "Lily, go back to the truck. Get the emergency blanket," he managed to gasp out, his teeth chattering. She didn't hesitate, scrambling back towards the road. When she returned, they wrapped the thin, silver blanket around themselves and the deer, a fragile shield against the biting wind. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Soon, flashing lights appeared in the distance. Someone had seen Michael's abandoned truck and called the authorities. Park rangers arrived, their expressions a mixture of concern and disbelief as they took in the scene. A half-submerged truck, a shivering man and teenager wrapped in a foil blanket, and a rescued deer huddled between them. The initial relief of rescue quickly turned to a stern lecture. "Sir, what you did was incredibly dangerous," one of the rangers, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, said, her voice firm. "The ice is unstable. You could have been killed. You have a daughter to think about." Michael knew she was right. He had acted impulsively, without considering the risks. But in that moment, seeing the trapped and terrified animal, he hadn't thought of anything else. "I couldn't just leave it there to die," he said, his voice hoarse. "We understand your compassion, sir, but there are protocols for these situations. We have trained personnel and equipment. You put yourself and your daughter in serious danger." As the rangers assessed the deer and called for animal control, Michael and Lily were led to the warmth of their vehicle. Wrapped in thick blankets, they finally started to feel the warmth seeping back into their frozen limbs. But the ranger's words echoed in Michael's mind. He had been reckless. Had he jeopardized Lily's well-being in his impulsive act of heroism? Back at the cabin, wrapped in warm clothes and sipping hot cocoa, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a wave of conflicting emotions. Lily sat beside him, unusually quiet, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames in the fireplace. "Dad," she said softly, breaking the silence, "you were really brave." Her words, simple and sincere, pierced through his guilt and self-recrimination. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not judgment but a flicker of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Admiration. "We both were," he said, reaching out to take her hand. Her fingers were still cold. The rescue of the deer had been a moment of shared crisis, a break in the heavy cloud of their grief. For the first time since Sarah's death, they had faced something together, and in doing so, had found a fragile connection. Later that evening, as the local news ran a story about the single dad's frozen lake rescue, the phone rang. It was a reporter, wanting to hear Michael's story. He hesitated. He didn't want to be seen as a reckless hero. He just wanted to be a good father. But then he thought of Lily's quiet admiration, the way her eyes had looked at him. Maybe, just maybe, this act of impulsive bravery had shown her something important, something about the kind of man he was, the kind of father he wanted to be. He agreed to the interview. As he recounted the events of the day, he focused not on his own actions, but on the instinct to help, the shared fear he and Lily had experienced, and the unexpected bond that had formed between them in the face of danger. He spoke about Sarah, about her love for animals, and how he felt he had honored her memory. The aftermath of the rescue rippled through their small community. Michael's story resonated, a tale of selfless courage in the face of a harsh winter. People stopped him in the grocery store, offering words of encouragement and admiration. Even the park rangers, while still emphasizing the danger of his actions, acknowledged his bravery. The most significant change, however, was in Lily. The wall she had built around herself after Sarah's death seemed to have developed a few cracks. She started talking more, sharing snippets of her day, even occasionally asking Michael about his work. The headphones weren't a permanent fixture anymore. One afternoon, a few weeks after the incident, Lily found Michael sitting by the lake, the ice now receding at the edges, hinting at the thaw to come. She sat down beside him, a comfortable silence settling between them. "They released the deer back into the wild today," she said softly, not looking at him. "The rangers sent me a picture." Michael smiled. "That's good." They sat there for a while longer, watching the water lap gently against the thawing ice. The air was still cold, but there was a hint of spring in the breeze, a promise of new beginnings. "Dad," Lily said, her voice hesitant, Do you ever think about what Mom would have done?" Michael looked at her, his heart aching with a familiar pang of grief. "All the time, honey, all the time." "Do you think she would have done what you did? Go into the lake?" He thought for a moment, picturing Sarah's fierce spirit, her unwavering empathy. "Yes, Lily, I do. She had a big heart, just like you." Lily finally looked at him, a small smile gracing her lips. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her in months, and it warmed him more than any fire could. The attention from the news eventually faded, and life in the cabin slowly returned to a new kind of normal. The silence wasn't as heavy anymore, often filled with Lily's laughter or the sound of them talking. They started taking walks together by the lake, sharing stories and memories of Sarah, their grief becoming less of a burden and more of a shared history. Michael still thought about the risks he had taken that day on the ice. He knew he had been foolish, driven by instinct and emotion. But he also knew that something had shifted between him and Lily. The frozen lake had not only held a trapped animal, but also the frozen grief that had separated them. In his impulsive act of bravery, he had inadvertently broken the ice around their hearts, allowing a thaw to begin. The scars from the sharp edges of the ice remained on his hands, a permanent reminder of that day. But they were also a reminder of the strength he didn't know he possessed, and the unexpected way that an act of compassion, however reckless, could mend a broken family. The ice on the lake would eventually melt completely, giving way to the promise of spring, and in the cabin by the shore, a father and daughter were finally starting to heal together.